I never thought I would end up sitting in a police station explaining to two cops why I opened my own mail. But that is exactly what happened on a Tuesday afternoon in Scottsdale, Arizona, thanks to Barbara Mitchell, the most insufferable HOA board president I had ever encountered. My name is Harold Jensen, and I had moved into the Saguaro Hills community about 8 months earlier. The neighborhood was picture-perfect with its terracotta roofs, manicured lawns, and views of the McDowell Mountains. I worked remotely as a software engineer, which meant I was home most days, and that also meant I had the misfortune of crossing paths with Barbara more often than the average resident. Barbara was in her early 50s, always dressed like she was about to attend a country club luncheon even when she was just checking her mailbox. Her blonde hair was shellacked into place with enough hairspray to create its own weather system, and she wore oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. She drove a white Mercedes SUV with a custom license plate that read HOA Boss, which should have been my first warning sign when I moved in. The trouble started innocently enough. Our mailboxes were the communal type, grouped together in clusters throughout the neighborhood. My box was number 47, and Barbara's was number 74. They were in the same cluster unit, just on opposite sides. I had noticed over the months that Barbara had a habit of standing at the mailboxes for an unreasonable amount of time, not just collecting her mail but seeming to monitor who was getting what and when. On that particular Tuesday, I walked down to get my mail around 3 in the afternoon. I had been expecting an important delivery, a replacement credit card that I needed for an upcoming business trip. When I opened my box, I found several pieces of mail, including what looked like the envelope from my bank. There was also a package slip, indicating I had a parcel at the post office that was too large for the box. As I stood there sorting through my mail, Barbara pulled up in her Mercedes. She parked at an angle that blocked part of the walkway, got out, and marched over to the mailboxes with her designer purse swinging from her arm. "Good afternoon, Barbara," I said, trying to be polite despite our previous encounters. She had already cited me twice for having my trash cans visible from the street 15 minutes past the pickup time, and once for parking my car in my own driveway facing the wrong direction. Apparently a violation of some obscure HOA rule I had never heard of. She did not respond to my greeting. Instead, her eyes locked onto the mail in my hands. Her face went from its normal shade of foundation-caked beige to an alarming red. "What are you doing with that?" she demanded, pointing at the envelope from my bank. I looked down at my mail, confused. "Getting my mail." "That is my mail," she said, her voice rising to a shrill pitch that made a couple of birds fly out of a nearby palo verde tree. I looked at the envelope more carefully. It was addressed to Harold Jensen at 847 Saguaro Hills Drive, Scottsdale, Arizona. My name, my address. "No, this is definitely my mail. See? My name right here." Barbara snatched the envelope out of my hand before I could react. She held it up close to her face, squinting at it even though she was wearing her enormous sunglasses. "This is the wrong address. This is my mail." "Barbara, that literally has my name on it. Harold Jensen. That is me." I reached for the envelope, but she pulled it away. "I know what mail fraud looks like, Harold. I was not born yesterday. You have been stealing my mail, and I am going to report you." My confusion was rapidly turning into frustration. "How could I be stealing your mail when it has my name on it? That makes no sense." "Do not raise your voice at me," she snapped, even though I had not raised my voice at all. "I am the HOA president, and I will not tolerate this kind of criminal behavior in our community." "Criminal behavior? Barbara, this is insane. Look at the envelope. Read the name." She clutched the envelope to her chest like it contained state secrets. I am calling the police right now." "You stay right there." "I am not going anywhere because I did not do anything wrong," I said, my patience wearing thin. "But I do want my mail back." Barbara pulled out her phone and dialed 911. I stood there in disbelief as she reported to the emergency dispatcher that she had caught someone stealing mail red-handed at the community mailboxes. She gave them the address of our neighborhood entrance and said she was detaining the suspect. Detaining? "Barbara, you cannot detain me. I live here and that is my mail." She held up one finger at me in a shushing gesture while she continued talking to the dispatcher. "Yes, he is becoming aggressive. Please hurry." "I am not being aggressive," I said, though I could feel my blood pressure rising. "You are the one who stole my mail." By this point, a couple of neighbors had come out of their houses to see what the commotion was about. Mrs. Patterson from down the street stood on her driveway with her arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. Tom Rodriguez, who lived 2 houses down from me, walked over with a concerned expression. "Everything okay here?" Tom asked. "This man is a mail thief," Barbara announced loudly enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. "I caught him stealing my mail from the mailbox." "That is not what happened," I said, turning to Tom. "That envelope has my name on it. She took it from me and is now claiming it is hers." Tom looked between us, clearly trying to decide what to do. "Maybe we should just wait for the police to sort this out." "Fine by me," I said. "They will see that the mail is addressed to me and this whole thing will be over." Barbara stood there gripping my envelope, her jaw set in determination. "We will see about that." We waited in uncomfortable silence for about 10 minutes. Mrs. Patterson eventually went back inside, probably to watch from her window. Tom stayed with us, perhaps worried that the situation might escalate. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of Barbara holding my envelope, thinking it might be useful documentation later. "What are you doing?" Barbara shrieked. "You cannot take pictures of me without my permission. That is illegal. We are in public, Barbara. I can take pictures. And you are holding my stolen property, so I think documentation is appropriate." 2 Scottsdale police patrol cars pulled up to the mailbox cluster. 4 officers got out, which seemed like overkill for a disputed piece of mail, but Barbara had probably made it sound like an active robbery in progress. Officer Ramirez, a stocky man in his 30s with a no-nonsense expression, approached us first. His partner, Officer Chen, a younger woman with sharp eyes, came up beside him. "Who called this in?" Officer Ramirez asked. Barbara stepped forward immediately. "I did, officer. I caught this man stealing my mail. He was trying to leave with it when I stopped him." "That is absolutely not true," I said. "I was getting my own mail from my own mailbox when she accused me of stealing hers. Then she grabbed my mail out of my hands." Officer Ramirez held up his hand. "Okay, one at a time. Madam, you called this in. What exactly did you see?" Barbara launched into a dramatic retelling of events that bore almost no resemblance to reality. According to her version, she had been checking her mail when she noticed me, suspiciously lurking around the mailboxes. She claimed she saw me open multiple boxes and take mail from them before stuffing everything into my pockets. When she confronted me, I allegedly became verbally abusive and threatening. I listened to this fiction with my mouth hanging open. "Officer, I have a witness right here." "Tom, tell them what you saw." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I did not actually see how it started. I just heard the argument and came over. But when I got here, Barbara was holding an envelope and they were both claiming it was theirs." Officer Chen spoke up. "May I see the envelope in question?" Barbara reluctantly handed it over. Officer Chen examined it carefully, then looked at me. "Can I see your ID, sir?" I pulled out my wallet and handed her my driver's license. She compared it to the envelope, then showed it to Officer Ramirez. The envelope is addressed to Harold Jensen at 847 Saguaro Hills Drive, Officer Chen said. And this is his ID showing the same name and address. Barbara's face somehow managed to get even redder. That does not prove anything. He could have faked the address. I know that envelope is mine. I have been waiting for important documents from my bank. Madam, what bank do you use? Officer Ramirez asked. Wells Fargo, Barbara said confidently. Officer Ramirez looked at the envelope. This is from Chase Bank. There was a long pause. I could see Barbara's mind working, trying to come up with an explanation. Well, I have multiple bank accounts, she said defensively. You have an account with Chase Bank? Officer Chen asked. I have several accounts. Officer Ramirez turned to me. Sir, is this your mail? Yes, officer. I have been expecting a replacement credit card from Chase. That is my bank, my name, and my address on the envelope. May I see some other pieces of mail you collected today? Officer Chen asked. I showed her the other envelopes I had grabbed from my box. All of them were addressed to me at my address. She examined each one carefully. Madam, Officer Ramirez said to Barbara, all of this mail is clearly addressed to Mr. Jensen. Do you have any evidence that this mail belongs to you? He must have redirected my mail to his address, Barbara insisted. That is mail fraud. He is committing a federal crime. Barbara, that makes no sense, I said, exasperated. Why would I redirect your mail to my own address with my own name on it? That is not how mail fraud works. Officer Chen handed the envelope back to me. Mr. Jensen, this appears to be your mail. I am sorry for the confusion. This is outrageous, Barbara sputtered. I am the HOA president. I know what I saw. He was stealing mail from multiple boxes. Madam, did you actually see him open any mailbox other than his own? Officer Ramirez asked. Barbara hesitated. I saw him acting suspiciously. That is not an answer. Did you see him open another mailbox? He must have. How else would he have my mail? He does not have your mail, Officer Chen said firmly. He has his own mail with his own name on it. I could see the other two officers talking to some neighbors who had gathered to watch. One of them was speaking with Mrs. Patterson, who had come back outside. Officer Ramirez turned back to Barbara. Madam, you called 911 to report a crime that did not occur. You also took someone else's mail from them, which could actually be considered theft. I did not steal anything, Barbara protested. I was trying to recover my stolen property. Property that has his name on it, Officer Chen pointed out. Barbara crossed her arms. I want to file a complaint against him for mail theft and harassment. Madam, you can file a complaint if you want, but based on what we see here, there is no evidence of any crime by Mr. Jensen. In fact, you are the one who took his mail from him. Are you saying you are not going to arrest him? Barbara's voice had reached a pitch that probably bothered dogs 3 blocks away. There is nothing to arrest him for, Officer Ramirez said patiently. This is his mail. I decided to speak up. Officer, I would actually like to file a complaint against Miss Mitchell for making a false police report and for taking my mail. Barbara's eyes went wide. You cannot do that. I am the HOA president. Being HOA president does not give you immunity from the law, Officer Chen said. Officer Ramirez pulled out his notepad. Mr. Jensen, do you want to press charges for the mail she took from you? I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to teach Barbara a lesson, but I also knew that escalating this would make living in the neighborhood even more unbearable. I just want my mail back and for this to be documented. I do not want to press charges right now, but I want it on record in case something like this happens again. That is reasonable, Officer Ramirez said. He turned to Barbara. Miss Mitchell, I am going to give you a warning. You made a false report to 911, which is a crime. You also took someone else's mail from them. Mr. Jensen is choosing not to press charges at this time, but if anything like this happens again, you could face legal consequences. Do you understand? Barbara looked like she had been slapped. This is discrimination. You are taking his side because I am a woman. Officer Chen, who was also a woman, raised an eyebrow. This has nothing to do with gender, madam. It has to do with facts. The mail has his name on it. That is not debatable. I want to speak to your supervisor, Barbara demanded. You are welcome to file a complaint with the department, Officer Ramirez said, handing her a card. But that does not change the situation here. You are receiving a warning. Do not call 911 again unless there is an actual emergency, and do not take other people's mail. The officers took statements from both of us, as well as from Tom, who confirmed that Barbara had been holding the envelope when he arrived. Mrs. Patterson also gave a statement saying she had seen Barbara grab something from me during the argument. As the police were wrapping up, Officer Chen pulled me aside. Mr. Jensen, I would recommend you document any future interactions with Miss Mitchell. Take photos, keep records, that sort of thing. If she continues to harass you, you may need to pursue a restraining order. Over HOA disputes. I asked. Over harassment, she corrected. If this pattern continues, it crosses from being a neighbor dispute into harassment. Just something to keep in mind. The police finally left after about 45 minutes. Barbara stormed off to her house without another word, though she made sure to slam her car door and rev her engine unnecessarily as she drove the 100 feet to her driveway. Tom walked back toward his house with me. Man, that was intense. Barbara has always been a little much, but I have never seen her like that. She has had it out for me since I moved in, I said. Every little thing is a violation. My trash cans, my car, my lawn furniture, now apparently my own mail. You should come to the next HOA meeting, Tom suggested. There are a few of us who are getting tired of how she runs things. Maybe it is time for a change. I told him I would think about it, though the idea of spending an evening in a room with Barbara did not sound appealing. When I got back to my house, I sat down and opened my mail. The envelope from Chase did indeed contain my replacement credit card, just as I had expected. I took photos of all my mail with the addresses clearly visible, just in case I needed evidence later. The rest of the day passed quietly, but I could not shake the feeling that this was far from over. Barbara was not the type to let things go, especially when she had been proven wrong in front of witnesses and police officers. I was right to be worried. The next morning, I found a formal HOA violation notice on my front door. According to the notice, I was in violation of Community Rule 47, subsection C, which stated that residents must maintain appropriate conduct at all community facilities, including mailbox areas. The notice claimed I had been disruptive and created a disturbance at the mailbox cluster, and that I was being fined $200. I read the notice 3 times, each time getting angrier. Barbara was retaliating against me for the previous day's incident. I pulled out my HOA handbook and looked up Rule 47, subsection C. The rule existed, but it was clearly meant to address things like people having loud parties at the community pool or vandalizing common areas. It was not meant to punish someone for being falsely accused of mail theft. I decided to call the HOA management company that handled the administrative work for our community. After navigating an annoying phone tree, I finally reached a real person named Jennifer. "Hi, I am calling about a violation notice I received," I explained. "I think it is retaliatory and not a legitimate violation." Jennifer asked for my address and pulled up my account. I see the notice here. It was filed by Barbara Mitchell, the HOA president. It says you were disruptive at the mailbox area. I explained the entire situation from the previous day, including the police being called and Barbara being given a warning for making a false report. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Let me look into this. Can you email me any documentation you have? Police report number, photos, witness statements, anything like that. I can do that. But what about this fine? Do not pay it yet, Jennifer said. Let me review the situation. This does sound like it might be an inappropriate use of the violation system. I will get back to you within a couple of days. I thanked her and spent the next hour putting together a detailed email with everything that had happened. I included photos of my mail with my name clearly visible, photos I had taken of Barbara holding my envelope, and the business card Officer Ramirez had given me with the incident report number. 2 days later, Jennifer called me back. Mr. Jensen, I have reviewed your case and spoken with Barbara Mitchell. I am voiding the violation notice. Based on the police report and witness statements, it is clear that you were not at fault for the disturbance. However, Miss Mitchell is insisting that there are other ongoing issues with your property compliance. What other issues? I asked. She has submitted a list of alleged violations. Let me pull it up. I heard typing in the background. Okay, she says your front yard landscaping is not in compliance with community standards. Your garage door is frequently left open during the day, and you have unauthorized decorative items on your front porch. I walked outside with my phone to look at my house. My landscaping was identical to most of the other houses on my street, desert appropriate with rocks, cacti, and some decorative grasses. My garage door was open at the moment because I had been working on organizing some boxes, something I saw neighbors doing all the time. And my front porch decorative items consisted of a simple welcome mat and a small potted plant. Jennifer, none of that makes sense. My landscaping is the same as everyone else's. The garage door thing is not even a rule. Half the neighborhood has their garages open during the day. And I have a welcome mat. That is it, Jennifer sighed. Mr. Jensen, between you and me, I think Miss Mitchell is targeting you. But as the HOA president, she has the authority to file violation notices. What I can do is make sure each one is properly reviewed before any fines are issued. And I would recommend you attend the next board meeting to address these concerns publicly. When is the next meeting? Next Thursday at 7 in the evening at the community center. I marked it on my calendar and spent the next week documenting everything. I took photos of my landscaping and then walked around the neighborhood taking photos of similar landscaping at other houses. I researched every HOA rule in our handbook. I even printed out copies of the police report from the mail incident. The day before the HOA meeting, I went to the post office to pick up the package that had been too large for my mailbox. The slip had been in with my mail on the day of the Barbara incident, and I had forgotten about it in all the chaos. At the post office, I handed the slip to the clerk at the counter. She disappeared into the back and returned with a medium-sized box. As I was signing for it, the postmaster, a tall woman in her 60s named Deanne Santos, came out of her office. "Harold Jensen," she asked. "That is me. Can I speak with you for a moment?" I followed her into her office, wondering what this was about. She gestured for me to sit down. "I heard about the incident at your neighborhood mailboxes earlier this week," Deanne said. "One of my carriers filed a report about it. Your carrier was there." She arrived right after the police. She had witnessed some of the argument and was concerned. She also mentioned that this is not the first time Barbara Mitchell has caused issues with the mail. This was news to me. "What do you mean?" Deanne pulled out a file. We have received 3 complaints about Miss Mitchell in the past year. One from a carrier who said she verbally harassed him for delivering mail too late in the day. One from another resident who claimed Miss Mitchell took mail from their mailbox, though they could not prove it. And one from Miss Mitchell herself claiming that we were deliberately misdelivering her mail as part of some conspiracy. That sounds like Barbara, I said. The incident earlier this week, where she falsely claimed you stole her mail, is actually a serious matter. Mail theft is a federal crime, and making false accusations about it can be considered mail fraud. I wanted to let you know that our office is filing a formal complaint about her behavior. Really? Yes. Our carriers should not have to deal with harassment, and neither should residents. We take the security of the mail very seriously. Miss Mitchell will be receiving a letter from our office warning her that any future incidents could result in federal charges. I felt a sense of relief. Thank you. I was worried this whole thing would just blow over and she would face no consequences. She will face consequences if she continues, Deanne assured me. And if you have any future problems with your mail or with her interfering with your mail delivery, you contact me directly. She handed me her business card. I left the post office feeling better than I had in days. Barbara was not just going to get away with her behavior. There were actual consequences building up. The night of the HOA meeting arrived. The community center was a small building near the neighborhood entrance with a meeting room that could hold about 50 people. When I arrived at 10 minutes before 7, the room was already nearly full. Apparently word had gotten around about the mail incident, and people were curious. I spotted Tom and his wife Maria near the middle of the room and went to sit with them. Mrs. Patterson was there too, sitting in the front row. I recognized several other neighbors, including the Chens from across the street, the Williams family who lived on the corner, and old Mr. Cooper, who had lived in the neighborhood since it was built 15 years ago. At exactly 7, Barbara walked in with the other 2 board members, Richard Franklin and Susan Edwards. Richard was a retired accountant who mostly just went along with whatever Barbara wanted. Susan was newer to the board and seemed more independent, though she rarely spoke up. Barbara called the meeting to order and launched into a long recap of various neighborhood business, including landscape maintenance contracts, pool cleaning schedules, and upcoming community events. Everything was delivered in her characteristic imperious tone, as if she were addressing subjects rather than neighbors. Finally, she reached the agenda item for resident concerns. If anyone has any issues to bring before the board, now is the time. I raised my hand. Barbara's face tightened when she saw me, but she could not ignore me in front of everyone. Yes, Harold. I stood up. I want to address the violation notice I received last week, the one claiming I was disruptive at the mailbox area. That notice has been voided due to an administrative error, Barbara said quickly, trying to move on. It was not an administrative error, I said firmly. It was retaliation. You filed a false violation notice against me after you falsely accused me of stealing your mail and the police warned you about making false reports. The room went completely silent. Everyone was staring at either me or Barbara. Barbara's face flushed. I did not file a false violation. There was a disturbance at the mailbox area, and you were involved. The disturbance was caused by you falsely accusing me of a crime, I said. You grabbed my mail out of my hands, mail that clearly had my name and address on it, and claimed it was yours. When the police arrived, they confirmed it was my mail and gave you a warning. That is all documented in the police report. Mrs. Patterson spoke up from the front row. I was there. I saw the whole thing. Barbara was completely out of line. Tom stood up next to me. I was there too. Harold was not doing anything wrong. Barbara took his mail and called the cops on him for no reason. More people started talking at once. It became clear that the story had spread through the neighborhood, and opinion was largely on my side. Barbara banged her gavel, an actual wooden gavel she had bought for herself when she became president. "Order! This is not the time or place to litigate personal disputes. You made it an HOA issue when you filed a violation notice," I countered. "And I have a right to defend myself against false accusations." Susan Edwards, the quiet board member, spoke up. "Barbara, did you file that violation notice against Harold?" "Yes, but it was legitimate," Barbara insisted. "Based on what?" Susan pressed. "If the police determined he did not do anything wrong, how could it be a legitimate HOA violation?" Barbara sputtered, clearly not used to being questioned by her fellow board members. "He was disruptive. He raised his voice and caused a scene. After you stole his mail and falsely accused him of a crime," Mrs. Patterson interjected. Richard Franklin cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should move this discussion to a closed session with just the board." "No," I said. "This should be public. Barbara has been filing frivolous violations against me since I moved in. The trash can thing where I was cited because my cans were visible 15 minutes after pickup. The parking violation because my car was facing the wrong direction in my own driveway. Now this. It is a pattern of harassment." Several people nodded. Someone in the back called out, "She did the same thing to me about my trash cans." Another voice added, "She sent me 3 violation notices in 1 month about the color of my front door, the color that was approved when I painted it." The meeting was devolving into chaos. People were sharing their own stories of Barbara's overzealous enforcement of rules, often rules that seemed to be selectively applied or made up entirely. Barbara was banging her gavel repeatedly, her face now an alarming shade of purple. "This is inappropriate. I will not be attacked in this meeting." "Then maybe you should stop attacking residents with bogus violation notices," Tom said. Susan Edwards spoke again. "I think we need to seriously discuss how violations are being filed and approved. As a board, we are supposed to review these things together, but Barbara, you have been filing a lot of violations without bringing them to Richard and me first." "I am the president," Barbara said. "I have the authority to file violations when I see them." "But we are supposed to vote on fines," Susan said. "That is in our bylaws." Richard was flipping through a binder. "Susan is right. According to our governing documents, violation notices can be issued by any board member, but fines have to be approved by a majority vote of the board." "I know the rules," Barbara snapped. "I have been doing this for 5 years." "Then why are you filing fines without board votes?" Susan asked. Barbara did not have a good answer for that. The room was buzzing with conversations. I could see several people looking through their own copies of the HOA handbook, probably checking the rules Susan had mentioned. Mr. Cooper, the longtime resident, stood up slowly. He had to be in his 80s, and when he spoke, his voice was shaky but clear. "I helped write the original bylaws for this HOA when the neighborhood was first developed. The whole point of having a board instead of just a president was to prevent exactly this kind of abuse of power. Barbara, you have been acting like a dictator, not a representative of the community." The room erupted in applause. Barbara looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "I move that we hold a special election for a new HOA president," someone called out from the back. "Second," multiple people shouted. Barbara was shaking her head. "That is not how this works. Elections are held annually according to a set schedule." Susan was reading from the bylaws binder. "Actually, there is a provision for a special election if 20% of residents sign a petition calling for one. I will sign that petition right now." Mrs. Patterson announced. Who has paper? The meeting completely fell apart at that point. People were gathering in groups, discussing the possibility of removing Barbara from power. Several people came up to me to share their own stories of harassment and unfair violations. It became clear that Barbara had made a lot of enemies during her time as HOA president. Barbara, Richard, and Susan had a heated discussion at the front table. I could not hear what they were saying, but Barbara was gesturing wildly while Susan remained calm and Richard looked increasingly uncomfortable. Finally, Barbara grabbed her things and stormed out of the meeting without adjourning it or saying another word. Richard and Susan looked at each other, clearly unsure what to do. Susan stood up. I guess as vice president, I am adjourning this meeting. We will be scheduling another meeting within the next 2 weeks to discuss board procedures and the possibility of a special election. Thank you all for coming and for your input. As people filed out, Tom clapped me on the shoulder. Man, you really stirred things up. I just wanted to clear my name about the mail thing, I said. I did not expect all of this. This has been building for a while, Maria said. Barbara has been getting worse and worse. You just happened to be the catalyst. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. A petition for a special election circulated through the neighborhood and got signatures from over 40% of residents within 3 days. The HOA management company, at Jennifer's urging, conducted an audit of violation notices and fines from the past 2 years. They found that Barbara had filed over 100 violation notices, and at least 30 of them had resulted in fines that were never approved by the full board as required by the bylaws. I also received a call from Officer Chen. Mr. Jensen, I wanted to follow up with you about the Barbara Mitchell situation. We received a complaint from the Postmaster about her behavior, and given the false report she made about you, we are keeping this on file. If she contacts you or harasses you in any way, call us immediately. Do you think she will? I asked. Hard to say. Some people learn their lesson, others double down. Just be aware and document everything. The letter from the Postmaster arrived at Barbara's house that same week. I knew this because Barbara showed up at my door the next evening, waving the letter in my face. This is your fault, she shouted before I had even fully opened the door. You went to the post office and lied about me, and now I am being threatened with federal charges. I kept my hand on the door, ready to close it if necessary. I did not go to the post office to complain about you, Barbara. They contacted me because their carrier filed a report about your behavior. And you were threatening me with federal charges over mail that was clearly mine, so maybe this is just karma. I could lose my mailbox privileges, she said, her voice breaking. Do you understand that? They could ban me from using the community mailboxes. Then maybe you should not have grabbed my mail and falsely accused me of theft, I said. Actions have consequences. I am the HOA president. I was trying to protect the community. You were harassing a resident because you do not like being told you are wrong. And based on that meeting the other night, I am not sure how much longer you will be HOA president. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean, the petition for a special election? You know, the one that has way more signatures than required. Yeah, that is happening. Barbara stepped closer to my door, and I could smell the wine on her breath. You turned everyone against me. I have worked so hard for this community for 5 years, and you ruined everything in 1 week. I did not ruin anything. You did this to yourself. You could have just admitted you were wrong about the mail. You could have apologized. Instead, you filed a bogus violation notice against me and doubled down on your behavior. Now you are facing consequences from multiple sources. I did not do anything wrong, she insisted. though her voice lacked conviction. "Barbara, you grabbed mail out of my hands that had my name on it and called the police claiming I stole it from you. Then you tried to fine me for the disturbance you caused. The post office confirmed you have a history of problems with mail. The HOA management company found dozens of violations you filed without proper board approval. You absolutely did things wrong, and now you are being held accountable." She stood there for a long moment, swaying slightly. Then she turned and walked back toward her house, muttering to herself. I closed the door and immediately called Officer Chen to report the interaction. She said she would send someone to check on Barbara and make sure she was not a danger to herself or others given that she appeared to be intoxicated. 20 minutes later, I saw patrol car lights from my window. An officer spoke with Barbara at her door for several minutes. I could not hear what was said, but Barbara eventually went inside and the officer left. The special election was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Susan Edwards took over most of the day-to-day HOA operations. She immediately suspended all pending violation notices pending review and sent out an email to all residents explaining the situation and apologizing for the confusion and unfair enforcement under Barbara's leadership. Barbara did not attend any of the pre-election meetings or events. According to neighbors who lived near her, she rarely left her house except to get her mail, which she did very quickly and only when few people were around. Tom decided to run for HOA president in the special election. He was well-liked in the neighborhood, level-headed, and had a sensible platform of fair enforcement of reasonable rules and better communication with residents. 2 other people also threw their names in, but Tom was the clear favorite. Barbara did not run for re-election. In fact, she announced through the management company that she was resigning from the board entirely, effective immediately. The announcement included no explanation or apology, just a terse statement that she was stepping down due to personal reasons. The election was held on a Saturday in the community center. Tom won by a landslide, getting over 70% of the vote. Susan remained as vice president, and 2 new board members were elected to fill the other positions. At Tom's first official meeting as president, he made a point of publicly clearing my record of all violation notices that had been filed by Barbara. He also announced new procedures for how violations would be handled going forward, including mandatory board review before any fines were issued, and an appeal process for residents who felt they had been unfairly cited. "We are all neighbors here," Tom said during the meeting. "The HOA is supposed to help maintain our community and protect our property values, not harass people over minor issues or personal grudges. That is going to change starting now." The room broke into applause. It felt like the neighborhood was finally healing from years of Barbara's tyrannical leadership. About a month after the election, I saw a for sale sign go up in front of Barbara's house. I was not surprised. She had made herself so unpopular that staying in the neighborhood was probably unbearable for her. The house sold quickly. The new owners were a young couple with a baby, and they seemed friendly and normal. When they introduced themselves to me over the fence one afternoon, they mentioned that the previous owner had left in a hurry and seemed very bitter about something. "Neighborhood drama," I explained vaguely. "But it is all settled now. You will like it here." The HOA is actually reasonable these days. Life returned to normal after that. I got my mail without incident. No one accused me of crimes I did not commit. No bogus violation notices appeared on my door. It was amazing how peaceful a neighborhood could be when it was not being run by someone on a power trip. A few months later, I ran into Officer Chen at a coffee shop in Scottsdale. She recognized me and came over to say hello. "How is everything in your neighborhood?" she asked. "Much better," I told her. "New HOA president, no more harassment, and Barbara moved away." "I am glad to hear it. That whole situation was bizarre. In my 10 years on the force, I have seen a lot of neighbor disputes, but someone calling 911 over mail that clearly belonged to the other person was a first. Did anything else come of it? Like, did she face any legal consequences?" "She got the warning from us, and the postmaster sent her that letter. As far as I know, there were no charges filed because you declined to press charges, and the Postal Service decided a warning was sufficient. But all of it is documented, so if she pulls something like that wherever she moved to, there is a record." I hoped for the sake of Barbara's new neighbors that she had learned her lesson, but somehow I doubted it. People like that rarely changed. Several more months passed. The neighborhood was thriving under Tom's leadership. He organized community events that people actually wanted to attend, like food truck nights and movie screenings by the pool. Violation notices became rare and were only issued for actual problems, like someone leaving a broken-down car on the street for weeks or playing loud music at 3 in the morning. I became more involved in the community myself, even volunteering to help with the neighborhood newsletter. It felt good to be part of a functioning community instead of constantly being at war with the HOA. One evening, I was checking my mail at the usual cluster box when Mrs. Patterson walked up. "Harold, I have been meaning to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For standing up to Barbara at that meeting. I know it was not easy and you probably did not want all that attention, but you really changed things around here. A lot of us were too scared of her to say anything. You gave us the courage to speak up." "I just did not want to be accused of crimes I did not commit," I said with a smile. "But I am glad it worked out for everyone." "We all are," she said. "This neighborhood feels like a real community now instead of Barbara's personal fiefdom." As I walked back to my house with my mail securely in hand, I thought about how one small incident could snowball into something much larger. If Barbara had just looked at the envelope, admitted her mistake, and apologized, none of the rest of it would have happened. Her false accusation had set off a chain of events that ended with her losing her position, her reputation, and ultimately her home. It was a reminder that being in a position of power, even something as small as HOA president, came with responsibility. When you abused that power or refused to admit when you were wrong, eventually people would hold you accountable. I also thought about how important it was to stand up for yourself, even when it was uncomfortable. If I had just let Barbara take my mail, if I had paid the bogus fine she tried to impose, if I had not gone to that HOA meeting and publicly called out her behavior, nothing would have changed. She would have kept harassing me and others, getting worse and worse until someone else finally had enough. Sometimes you had to be willing to make waves to create positive change. It was not always easy or pleasant, but it was necessary. A year after the mail incident, the neighborhood was completely transformed. Tom had negotiated better rates with the landscaping company, organized a successful community garage sale that raised money for new playground equipment, and implemented a transparency policy where all board meetings were recorded and posted online for residents who could not attend. The community center had become an actual hub of activity instead of just a place where Barbara lectured people once a month. Kids played basketball on the outdoor court while parents chatted on the benches. The pool area was always full on summer evenings. People knew their neighbors by name instead of avoiding each other to prevent HOA drama. I had become friends with Tom, Maria, Mrs. Patterson, and several other neighbors. We had regular barbecues and helped each other with projects around our houses. It was the kind of neighborhood community I had hoped for when I first moved to Scottsdale. Every once in a while, someone would bring up the mail incident and the dramatic HOA meeting that followed. It had become neighborhood legend, the story of how one false accusation brought down a petty tyrant and transformed the community for the better. "Remember when Barbara called the cops on Harold for getting his own mail?" someone would say, and everyone would laugh. It had been stressful and frustrating at the time, but looking back, I could appreciate the absurdity of it. A grown woman so convinced of her own authority that she grabbed mail with someone else's name on it and called the police claiming theft. A HOA president so used to bullying residents that she thought she could retaliate with bogus fines and no one would question her. A situation so ridiculous that it took 4 police officers, a postmaster, and an entire neighborhood uprising to resolve. But that was the thing about HOAs. At their best, they helped maintain communities and protect property values. At their worst, they attracted petty tyrants who used their tiny amount of power to make everyone else miserable. The key was having good people in charge who understood that they were there to serve the community, not rule over it. I never saw Barbara again after she moved. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had bought a condo downtown, the kind of place with no HOA and no shared mailboxes. Maybe she had learned her lesson, or maybe she just could not handle being around neighbors after everything that happened. Either way, I was glad she was gone. The neighborhood was better without her, and I could finally enjoy my home without constantly looking over my shoulder for the next bogus violation notice. On the anniversary of the mail incident, Tom jokingly declared it Check Your Own Mail Day and sent out a newsletter reminding everyone to make sure the mail they collected actually had their name on it. Several people responded with their own stories of mail mix-ups and confusion, but all of them were handled with simple conversations and corrections, the way normal people handled things. No police calls, no accusations of federal crimes, no retaliation. Just neighbors being decent to each other and working out minor problems like adults. It was a small thing, but it represented everything that had changed in the past year. We had gone from a neighborhood terrorized by one person's power trip to a real community where people actually wanted to live and participate. And it had all started because Barbara Mitchell could not admit she was wrong about an envelope. The mail carrier who had witnessed the original incident eventually introduced herself to me one day. Her name was Patricia, and she had been delivering mail to Saguaro Hills for over a decade. "I saw Barbara coming and going from the mailboxes for years," Patricia told me. "She was always watching people, checking what mail they got, standing there for way too long. It made a lot of residents uncomfortable, but no one said anything because she was the HOA president." "Did she ever actually take anyone else's mail?" I asked. "Hard to say for sure since I was not always there when people picked up their mail. But there were complaints. People missing mail showing up damaged or opened. Nothing we could prove, but enough to be suspicious. Your incident was the first time someone actually caught her in the act and pushed back. I am just glad it is over." "Me too. My job is a lot easier when I am not worried about some HOA Karen harassing me or the residents. The new board is great." Tom even got us a thank you card signed by everyone in the neighborhood last Christmas. Barbara never did anything like that. It was little details like that which showed the difference between a good leader and a bad one. Tom appreciated the people who kept the community running, from the mail carriers to the landscaping crews to the pool maintenance workers. Barbara had treated them all as servants beneath her notice. I settled fully into my life in Scottsdale. Work was going well. I had great neighbors, and my house had appreciated in value thanks to the improved community atmosphere. People actually wanted to move to Sagaro Hills now, whereas during Barbara's reign, houses had sat on the market for months because word had gotten out about the nightmare HOA. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons. First, always document everything in any dispute, especially with HOA matters. Photos, emails, records of conversations, all of it could be crucial evidence if things escalated. Second, do not be afraid to push back against unjust authority. Barbara had gotten away with her behavior for years because most people just paid the fines and grumbled privately. It took someone being willing to make it public to create change. Third, community matters. Having good neighbors and a functional HOA made such a huge difference in quality of life. And finally, always check that the mail you are taking actually has your name on it before you accuse someone of federal crimes. That one seemed obvious, but apparently it needed to be said. I kept the police report from the mail incident in a file folder, along with the voided violation notice, the letter from the postmaster, and photos of all the evidence. I did not think I would ever need it again, but it was a good reminder of how quickly things could spiral and how important it was to have documentation. Tom framed a photo from the HOA meeting where everything came to a head and hung it in the community center with a plaque that read, "The day the community took back control." It became a symbol of what could happen when people stood together against abuse of power. Some people thought it was petty to commemorate the takedown of Barbara like that, but most of us saw it as an important reminder. HOA boards were made up of volunteers who were supposed to serve their communities, not lord over them. When someone forgot that, it was up to the residents to correct course, and we had corrected course dramatically and decisively. Years would pass and people would move in and out of the neighborhood, but the story of HOA Karen and the mail incident would persist. New residents would hear about it during welcome meetings or neighborhood barbecues, and it would serve as a cautionary tale about what happens when power goes unchecked. As for me, I continued to live peacefully in my house on Sagaro Hills Drive, getting my mail without incident, parking my car in whatever direction I wanted in my own driveway, and putting my trash cans out without fear of being cited for timing violations. It was a good life, made better by the fact that I had stood up for myself when it mattered and helped create positive change in my community. Not bad for a software engineer who just wanted to get his replacement credit card from the mailbox. The whole saga had taken only a few months from start to finish, but its effects lasted far longer. Barbara's resignation and departure changed the entire dynamic of the neighborhood. Property values increased. Community participation soared. People actually looked forward to HOA meetings instead of dreading them, and I never took for granted the simple act of checking my mail. Every time I opened mailbox number 47 and pulled out envelopes with my name on them, I remembered the absurdity of being accused of stealing my own mail and the chain of events it had triggered. Sometimes the smallest incidents led to the biggest changes. Sometimes standing up to a bully, even one with a title and perceived authority, was exactly what a community needed. And sometimes, justice actually prevailed, even in the strange world of homeowner associations. The last time I thought about Barbara was when Tom organized a neighborhood anniversary party celebrating 2 years of new leadership. The community center was packed with residents. Kids ran around playing games, and people were genuinely happy to be there. Mrs. Patterson raised her glass in a toast. To Harold, for having the courage to stand up to tyranny over a piece of mail, and to Tom, for leading us into a better future. Everyone cheered and clinked glasses. I felt embarrassed by the attention but also proud of what we had all accomplished together. As the party continued into the evening, I looked around at my neighbors laughing and enjoying themselves, and I realized this was what community was supposed to be. Not fear and harassment and bogus fines, but people coming together, supporting each other, and making where they lived better for everyone. And all because I refused to let someone take my mail.